Well, maybe let's change gears a bit. We'll talk a bit about English Premier League soccer, and if you could maybe do a similar thing here, just give a little bit of background. How did you get interested? What
Sure.
struck you, and how has that evolved over time?
Okay, so I grew up in the rural South in the 1970s, and there was no soccer. There was none on TV at that time. Because I was in a rural area, there were no youth leagues. And I was always a pretty good athlete, but I wasn't big enough to play football. I couldn't hit well enough to play baseball. I could do some things like run fast and jump high, but I had some limitations. Um, my junior year, we had a kid move to my high school when we were sophomores from the Eastern Seaboard who had played soccer growing up
Hmm.
and wanted to play high school soccer. And my school didn't have a team.
Hmm.
And after a year of nagging, when we were at the start of our junior year, the school finally agreed to have a team. And the coach went around to the coaches of the other sports and said, who do you have that's a good athlete that was maybe too small to play your sport, that
Hmm.
tried out and what have you?
Hmm.
Well, so I had played basketball all the way through ninth grade. And in between eighth and ninth grade, everyone else grew 6 inches and I did not.
Hmm.
And I came back for ninth grade and I was a bench warmer. I was basically too small to play at that point. So the basketball coach remembered me and he told the soccer coach, oh, you might look at this Davis kid. So I ended up playing on the first two varsity teams at my high school.
Ah.
And I always had good stamina and speed, and the coach just had us run for the first few practices.
Hmm.
Like we would run sprints, we would run laps, etc. And there were about 3 or 4 of us skinny kids who could run indefinitely. And he took us aside and he said, okay, you're my midfielders.
Hmm.
And we said, great, what's a midfielder? And then he found out I was left-footed.
Hmm.
And he said, okay, you're my left attacking mid. And I said, oh, okay, what's a left attacking mid? So I ended up playing, it was really more like a wing position on my high school soccer team. Had a blast, even though we were bad, because none of us had played before, except for the occasional exchange student or, the guy from the Eastern Seaboard that got the team started. So I had a great time playing soccer in high school, went to college and played for the club team my first semester, but it was clear that my skill level was not at where it needed to be to play with those guys. But then I played pickup in grad school when I would get the opportunity. And after I got married and we moved to Cincinnati, one of my wife's friends had a co-ed 30 and over team. So when I was about 32, I started playing again. And at that point, I sort of understood what was supposed to be happening because I had seen the sport more on TV. I was still young enough to have enough speed to play and so forth. So I ended up playing in this 30 and over league until I was about 45, by which point I couldn't outrun the 30-year-olds anymore. So, but around the same time that I was finishing up my time in that league, my daughter started playing. And she started out in say, and she was clearly better than almost all of the other players. So when she was in 4th grade, right around that time, we put her onto a select team. And she played soccer. And this was my wife's first real introduction to it because she had come to some of my games, when I was playing in that league, but she was really not paying that much attention. She was talking with other spouses and so forth. But when my daughter started playing, my wife got really interested, and my daughter played club all the way through sophomore year of high school. And then she burned out a little bit because it was very competitive, and she decided to just play say again, which is a rec league. Had a blast doing that. But meanwhile, my wife and I started watching the Premier League. So this would have been, oh gosh, my daughter would have been junior in high school about 7 or 8 years ago. And I had read about Arsenal and Arsene Wenger, the Invincibles team that went undefeated in the early 2000s. So I decided Arsenal was my team. My wife liked the way Tottenham Hotspur played. So she decided that Spurs were her team. What we did not know at the time we made our choices is those two teams are the bitterest rivals in the Premier League. So now we joke about having a mixed marriage. You know, like Bono's parents in Ireland, one Catholic parent and one Protestant parent. So we're the North London equivalent of that mixed marriage. But since then, we've watched the Premier League every chance we get. We'll record 4 or 5 games a weekend. We might not watch all of them, but we'll watch the majority of them. If Arsenal or Spurs are on, you know where we're going to be. So it was. I had been interested in the sport for a long time, but didn't start watching it until my daughter started playing rec league again, and that was the first time that my wife watched it. And I think the other reason that my wife got into it, there would be parent-daughter games.
Oh.
And when my daughter was in about 6th grade, my wife took part in one of those parent-daughter games and realized it's a really hard sport to play.
Oh.
It takes a high degree of skill, and I don't think she had any idea. It's easy for someone who hasn't played to watch a game and say, why did that person mishit that ball? And when you're out there and the ball is coming at you with speed and so are 2 opposing players, it's very easy to mishit the ball. So I think that was what got her really interested in it. So we've been watching ever since, almost exclusively English Premier League. I've been to a few FC Cincinnati games. If nothing else is on, I might watch the Bundesliga or the Spanish League, La Liga. But mostly it's English Premier League, and of course we watch every World Cup match that's televised when those roll around.
Definitely that level of soccer, for sure, and the Premier League really standing out as well, for what people I think are interested in, and also what people seem to follow quite a bit. So
it's the best league in the world. When you look at the Champions League, where all the top teams in Europe play each year, an English team doesn't always win Champions League. In fact, nobody wins the majority of them, because a Spanish team will win, an Italian team will win. But top to bottom, if you watch Spain, for instance, there is no chance that the team in 18th place is going to beat the team in 2nd place. But in England, anyone can beat anyone. The talent level for even the teams that are going to get relegated is incredibly high.
Oh, sure. Well, definitely. They get the players, and they do quite a job. And when you think about the national teams and all that, they're drawing so many Premier League players and all that too. So
the English teams, they have the biggest worldwide following, which means they have the biggest budgets. So there are players who choose to stay in Germany or Italy or Spain. Those are the other top 3 leagues, I would say. But usually if Manchester United, yuck, or Chelsea, yuck, if they want a player, they can afford to go get them.
No, sure. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Well, what I was going to ask is, what do you think, or what do you, as you maybe talk soccer with people, or it comes up, or you've been involved with both playing the game and being a fan of varying levels and whatnot, what are some misconceptions that people have, or misunderstandings maybe about why you would enjoy soccer? What stands in the way for people, do you think?
That's a really good question, John, because people do have misconceptions. In soccer, you can have a 0-0 tie, and it can be just as exciting as can be. And a lot of people will say, how can you watch that? A high scoring game is 3-1. And I think it's precisely because goals are so hard to come by that sort of the celebration is so intense and jubilant when they happen, right? It's a rare thing. I mean, if you celebrated every made shot in a basketball game that way, you'd be exhausted halfway through the first quarter, right? But in soccer, the action is nonstop. And even in a 0-0 game, you can have incredibly exciting attacks, great saves from the goalkeeper. So one of the things I like about soccer, it's kind of spoiled me in terms of watching American football, in that in soccer, the game runs, it's a running clock, and you don't huddle
Right.
and you don't have commercial breaks, right? The only break is at halftime, where they take 10 or 15 minutes, and that's when you have to suffer through all the commercials. But if you're a smart fan, that's when you get up and go get a snack and go to the bathroom and whatever else you need to do, check your email, right? But otherwise, it's 45 minutes of action, followed by that break, followed by 45 more minutes of action. I think also, this is going to sound like a silly consideration, but time is valuable. And I appreciate that in soccer, when a game is scheduled in a 2-hour time block, is going to start and end within that 2-hour time block. You've got your 45 minutes and maybe some stoppage time, and then 10 or 15 minutes at half, and then 45 more minutes. Baseball and football just seem interminable to me to watch. But that's not entirely true. I like to watch the Saints. I like to watch the Pelicans, right? My New Orleans teams. I'll watch the Bengals until it becomes clear they're going to be really bad. And now that Joe Burrow is hurt, I don't think I'll watch any more Bengal games this season.
Hard watch these days, right?
Yeah, well, I was having fun watching Joe Burrow, and you know that the franchise is just cursed. They finally get the quarterback they need, and you know,
right.
I hope that he can rehab and get back to where he was. But
definitely, yeah. You'd hate to see it be, you know, his abilities be that diminished. That's for sure, because he's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like when I watch American football, there's a play, and then there's a huddle, and then there's 3 replays of the play, and then there's a play, but there's a penalty flag, and then there's a play, and then there's a punt, and then there's a commercial. So I feel like if you watch for 10 minutes, you probably see about 90 seconds of actual action.
All right. There's a lot wrapped around that of slowdown, stoppage, whatever, you know, right. Whether commercial or on the field timeouts or whatever, but right. No, that's true.
Yeah. And I also feel like announcers in almost all sports get on my nerves, but I think in football, they're the worst because they try to make it sound like it's rocket science. He's going to play the 2 technique in the A gap, and you know, they try to use terminology to make it sound like it's more complicated, when what it really is can your 300-pound man smash my 300-pound man? And if the answer is yes, then you're going to win.
And you can come up with whatever theory you want to after the fact to make
if I was a GM in the NFL, all I would do once I got my quarterback is draft offensive and defensive linemen. That's all I would do. And I would say, okay, let's see how good your quarterback does when my defensive line flattens him.
Yeah.
and let's see how good your defensive backs do when my quarterback has 10 seconds to find an open receiver.
Yeah, right. Where anybody can get open in that time, right?
Yeah, but they make it sound like it's a combination of military tactics and advanced physics when they describe the plays, and I just think that's silly. No, the guy ran, he faked to the right, he cut to the left, and then he was open, and the quarterback hit him with the ball. That's, you know, it's not more complicated than that, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong.
Sure. No, I know from the many people who have to put up with my sons and I watching different sports. You know, there's long been that complaint with basketball, football, you know, so forth, that of all the stoppages all the time like that. The one thing that of my sons, though, my one son is very much a football fan and a little bit of a basketball fan. My other son is a goodly bit of a soccer fan, but also a big basketball fan. But the thing that we will often joke with the soccer fan son about is the extra time added on later on, which always seems like sort of magically to appear when a team needs to do something or something, which I know it's not that way and it's not meant to be that way, but I think we sometimes think of, though it's very slow going, we sometimes think of the other sports as having more a finite sense. And you spoke to that too, which I think is probably fair, that there is that finite sense. But sometimes there's like that extra few minutes, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, how did this happen?
So there are some books out there that are basically soccer analytics.
Mm,
And I think where I read this was a book called Soccernomics, but I've read more than one
mm,
of these books, so I'm not sure if this is the right book. But the statisticians did a study of home field advantage in
mm,
the top soccer leagues, and they were trying to say, okay, is it the crowd size? Is it that more fouls are called on the visiting team? What have you? And the only significant difference they could find was that the stoppage time tended to be longer if the home team was losing and shorter if the home team was winning. And they didn't put it down, to any kind of
mm,
conscious conspiracy on the part of the officiating. They just thought, well, if there's 50,000 people in the stadium, you can't help but have your emotions influenced
mm,
by that.
mm,
And if they're howling that the other team is time wasting, that's one thing I don't like in soccer.
mm.
If my team has a 1-goal lead in the last 5 minutes, we're just going to time waste all that we can. And that's part of what the ref is supposed to be monitoring when they're giving stoppage time. But yeah, that was the only thing they could find. And I saw something more recently where that had pretty much gone away.
Oh, interesting.
So I think once the officials became aware that they had this built-in bias, they were able to, it's like anything else, right? Being aware of your biases makes you better able to minimize or negate their impact.
Sure. Oh, definitely. And I can see how this is the kind of thing that can occur to a given fan at a given moment in a given game, but it's not, as you say, it's not necessarily something that does carry on in any organized fashion by the referee.
Well, so I'm active in a couple of Arsenal discussion groups, and one of the most common things that comes up repeatedly is how the officials favor Man U against anybody else. So, if somebody asks a question about a call or a rules question or something like that, the answer is always, well, if it happened in a Man U game, Man U would get a penalty. But if it happened in an Arsenal game, there would be no foul called. So even though our bitterest rival is Spurs, I think Man U is seen as the team that gets all the favorable treatment, all the favorable press coverage, etc.
Oh, definitely. And I don't know to what degree this was in direct response to this, but my son, who's the soccer fan, is a Man City fan. And I think part of it is because my father, who, I don't know, kind of dances among different teams at a moment's notice. He hasn't stuck with any team that over the many years now. He's always like on to something new and on to something else. Really held up for Man U for some long stretch of time. I think that got my son thinking in rejection of that, which is actually how I chose all of my teams as a child.
So I think Man City is controversial. I don't know if you know anything about their ownership.
Not much, no.
So Man City was not even in the Premier League for a lot of the Premier League's existence. In England they have the relegation structure in the soccer pyramid is what they call it. So you have to play your way into the Premier League, and the bottom 3 teams in the Premier League get sent down to the next lower league at the end of each season. And the top 3 teams, well, so actually what happens is from the league below the Premier League, which is called the Championship, the top 2 move up, and then teams 3 through 6 have a 4-team tournament to see who gets to play, to see who's the 3rd team that moves up. That's one of the things that I like about the Premier League is instead of being awarded with the highest draft pick for being terrible, you're actually kicked out of the league, which I think is as it should be.
Indeed.
America is supposed to be this meritocracy, but we don't kick teams out. We say, hey, we're going to give you the top pick.
All right.
But anyway, I digress. Man City was not in the Premier League for a long time. And then they were bought by a rich, I don't remember if he's Qatari. They're run by oil money. And so a lot of people really hate Man City, partly because they're nouveau riche. but I don't think any of us would object if our team got bought by someone who would buy championships for them. But they're seen as the oil money team, and then Chelsea is similarly, they didn't get really good until about 15, maybe 12 years ago, when they were bought by a Russian oligarch who has infinite reserves of cash. So Chelsea will spend 200 million pounds in a transfer window. And I shouldn't be complaining because Arsenal will spend 90, which is more than most teams can spend. But so there's this perception that Man City and Chelsea, and also Man U to a certain extent, they can just buy whoever they want. And so if they don't win the title, it's because of incompetent management, because anybody with that budget should be able to win.
Sure, could carry it out if you had the access to those players. Exactly, yeah.
Right. So the big six in the Premier League, the teams that have the most prestige and the most money, are the two Manchester teams, Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Spurs. But of those six teams, if you had to pick a big four, Arsenal would be fifth and Spurs would be sixth, and the other four would be the big four. So we complain about the four teams that can spend more than us while not paying attention to the 15 teams that can't. Because we're all hypocrites when it comes right down to it.
Everybody wants to be on top. That's for sure.
Every fan is a hypocrite. So Chelsea's manager, when we first started following the sport, was Jose Mourinho. And if you follow the sport, he's a controversial character. And what typically happens is he goes to a team, he takes them to levels of success they have never experienced, and then he becomes so obnoxious that he gets himself canned, in spite of the fact that he's won titles everywhere he's gone. Well, so when we first started watching the Premier League closely, he was kind of the boogeyman. He coached Chelsea, who we hated, and they had a player named Diego Costa, who was like a villain in a soap opera, who we also hated. So we hated Chelsea and we hated Mourinho. Well, lo and behold, about a year and a half ago, Spurs dismissed their longtime manager and they brought in Mourinho. And my wife had to say, well, he's not really so bad.
Not as bad as I thought.
And he has been on best behavior since he's been with Spurs. And go ahead, ask me where Spurs are in the table right now.
Sure.
They are in first place. So she likes Jose just fine at this point.
Right, the magic continues, and right, it works for you. If what is working for you, you're happy to have it, right?
He'll win some silverware there, and then he'll say the wrong thing to the wrong person, and he'll be kicked to the curb.
Wow.
But only after he wins some kind of glorious trophy for them.
Yeah, right. Oh man, make it worth the while.
And my team is in 14th, so I have Mourinho envy.
Oh man, this could be a rough outcome here of this year, right? So.
Well, they play this coming weekend.
Oh wow!
So they are one tube stop apart in North London.
Wow.
So it's called the North London Derby. Derby is spelled like Derby, but they pronounce it Derby. So. Okay. So when Everton plays Liverpool, it's a derby. When the two Manchester teams play, it's a derby. Well, when Spurs and Arsenal play, it's the North London Derby.
Big times ahead. It's going to be exciting here. I wish you well.
The funny thing is, when we're watching our teams, we cheer and yell and scream, except in the North London Derby. And then if my team scores, I'm gauging her reaction and I'm muting my celebration, and vice versa. So there have been times when we've watched the North London Derby in total silence.
Wow. Well, you find peace even in these contentious moments.
That's right. Well, we've been married since 1985, so we're not going to get silly over a soccer match.
No, indeed. So, well, very good. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights here. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording and